I'm gonna try not to get emotional and like pissed off or anything, but I definitely don't feel good about what I read. That's for sure. Hey guys, how's it going? So I'm reading Howard Kazanjian's book. Just came out 5 days ago, and it's a really interesting read. It really goes over the life of Howard Kazanjian in general, but it goes more so over a lot of things you wouldn't expect to read about. Howard Kazanjian's a pretty amazing guy, and I'm learning a lot about his life. So I want to cover a few things from this, and of course, I want you guys to pick up the book, the Kindle, audiobook, whatever. It's really, really interesting. And there's a lot of excerpts from Marcia Lucas, who is George Lucas's ex-wife, who had a big hand in editing the original trilogy. She did a fantastic job. And it goes over their relationship a little bit and all of her work that she did with the movies. Anyways, the first excerpt that I'd like to go over in this video is on page 324 in the Kindle. And it finally gets to the part where George sold Lucasfilm to Disney in 2012. And it says that Kleiser, who is quoting this, he says, "I was surprised by the sale, but it was understandable. Trying to keep that franchise going and not be attacked by the fans every time, it looked like it was not fun anymore for him. Who needs that kind of angst? Getting a gigantic paycheck and relaxing? What a good idea." So while a lot of people say that, George was getting old, he didn't want to do it in his 70s, which George had said many times himself, even the people around him understood the amount of hate that he was getting from the prequels, from fans. And look, I've said this a million times. Star Wars fans are the most passionate fans on the face of the planet. We can be the most amazing, supportive group of people. We can also be the biggest assholes in the world. And that just comes from a place of passion and entitlement for this story that even supersedes the creator himself, sometimes, I guess. It goes on to explain how he had appointed Kathleen Kennedy, Spielberg's assistant decades before on Indy, to run Lucasfilm. And Kazanjian says that George likes women. And he says, "I don't mean that in any weird way. He just likes women around him." So I wasn't surprised when he picked Kathleen. She also has a stellar record. So fast forward to 2015, and the ILM soundstage was reserved for a 40th anniversary. And here is where Marcia Lucas actually really got to shine. And a lot of people were saying that this was Marcia's night. George didn't show up. He wasn't too big on going to certain celebrations or events, it seems like, from what I'm reading from this. He was kind of an introvert, it seems like. Or not kind of, most likely really an introvert. Now, in the beginning, there was a foreword by Marcia, and it says that she didn't really want to talk much about her relationship with George or, her involvement with Star Wars all that much because she didn't want to seem like she had sour grapes. She didn't want to seem like she's just the ex-wife of George Lucas, now talking smack or whatever it may be. And I gotta say, that's pretty commendable, because I'm sure a lot of people would have said something like that. But, now 40 years later, she's starting to talk a little bit, and it's nice. I'd love to be able to talk to her and thank her for everything she did for the original trilogy, and to ask her some questions about what it was like back then, especially compared to now. And learning so much about this process of filmmaking is something that I hope to apply to my own film someday, because I'd love to go on and make other films besides like a Star Wars fan film. Maybe something I can actually make money from one day. It just seems like the way to go with making films in general is to just fund it yourself. Sure, you may not get a big budget, you may not get all these executives, giving you tens of millions of dollars, but at least you'll be able to tell your story the way you want to tell it. Because it seems like too many people just get into the kitchen and they're just too many cooks, Now, there's another piece here that we really need to go over. It's on page 326 of the Kindle. So in 2018, Mark Hamill got his star. The Kazanjians were there, Howard and his wife. George was there, Mark Hamill, of course, Harrison Ford, and a few others. After the speech was over and Mark got his star, they all met up at the Roosevelt Hotel. Howard and his wife Carol walked in with Harrison Ford, and then they sat with George Lucas and Mary Lou, who is Mark Hamill's wife. And Kathleen Kennedy took a seat as well. Now I quote, "Lucas had stated several times publicly that Kennedy and execs at Disney had pushed him out and discarded his ideas for the Star Wars sequels. But he and Kennedy talked for some time. In quotations, he was trapped," Kazanjian says. "He sat down on a long bench and Mary Lou sat next to him, and I sat on the other side. We were very nice friends with George and Marcia. Very nice friends," Carol reflects. When I read this just a few moments ago, that he was trapped, and that he blatantly called out Kathleen Kennedy after putting her in charge, and called out the Disney executives who pushed him out and discarded his ideas, it makes me angry. It makes me sad. George Lucas is my hero. He's done so much for the world. He's done so much for me. I mean, I have everything I have in life because of his story, right? I'm essentially just talking about his story, and this is my career, you know? It's what he's done for so many people is larger than life. And to just hear these execs push him out like that, especially someone that he hired, regardless of him being cool with her and saying they talked for some time, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. It just makes me mad. And I'm going to try not to get emotional and like pissed off or anything, but I definitely don't feel good about what I read. That's for sure. And now this is where it starts to get really juicy. Now, George Lucas's ex-wife, Marcia Lucas, who edited a lot of the originals, goes on to say this. I like Kathleen. I always liked her, says Marcia Lucas. She was full of beans. She was really smart and really bright, really wonderful woman. And I liked her husband, Frank. I like them a lot. Now she's running Lucasfilm and making movies. It seems to me that Kathy Kennedy and J.J. Abrams don't have a clue about Star Wars. They don't get it. And J.J. Abrams is writing these stories. When I saw that movie where they kill Han Solo, I was furious. I was furious when they killed Han Solo. Absolutely, positively, there was no rhyme or reason to it. As we know, George says, it's like poetry. It rhymes. I thought, you don't get the Jedi story. You don't get the magic of Star Wars. You're getting rid of Han Solo, and then at the end of this last one, The Last Jedi, they have Luke Skywalker disintegrate. They killed Han Solo, they killed Luke Skywalker, and they don't have Princess Leia anymore. And they're spitting out movies every year, and they think it's important to appeal to a woman's audience, so now their main character is this female who's supposed to have Jedi powers. But we don't know how she got Jedi powers, or who she is. It sucks. The storylines are terrible, just terrible, awful. You can quote me, J.J. Abrams, Kathy Kennedy, talk to me. Damn. Now, keep in mind, she also goes on to say that when she saw episode 1, she went in her car and cried because it was terrible, and she just thought the acting was weird. She thought the story was weird, and she was hoping that, like most fans, it would focus on Anakin essentially dismantling the Jedi Order, which is what we got at the end of episode 3, but she was hoping that would be episode 1. Rather, she was confused as to why it was focusing on this boy who looks like he's 6 years old, and I quote, 6 years old, and this princess who he falls in love with later who looks like she's 20. And she found it was just weird, and she just was, it was too focused on CGI. Hey, I grew up with episode 1. I love episode 1. I thought it was great. I don't see what, she doesn't like about it, but hey, this is George Lucas's ex-wife. This is Marcia Lucas, who edited the original trilogy and made so many amazing changes. Like, did you know, for example, they were just gonna have Palpatine fall to the bottom of the shaft and splat. That's it. He's dead. And she's like, no, we need to add something more monumental. This is the freaking Emperor of the Universe, guy who's shooting lasers or lightning out of his fingertips. We need to have some monumental big nuclear explosion, which they later added in because of her. And there were also lots of other little things that Howard Kazanjian added in there that really changed the story as well. Kazanjian goes on to say, generally speaking, I think that the filmmakers on The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi didn't understand the story. They didn't understand what a Jedi Knight was all about. That's the simplest way to put it. Skywalker's the story, and I think that's what they failed at. I'm not talking about just Mark Hamill as Skywalker, it's the overall psychological story of Skywalker, and of course, the Jedi Knights. The ardent fans know more about the storyline than the filmmakers. And again, please, if you like the sequel trilogy, more power to you. I really, really envy you, and I wish I was there too. And I'm not making this video, I never make any video to crap on sequel trilogy enjoyers. I don't, that's not my thing. I mean, I share the same sentiments as Howard Kazanjian, who freaking produced episode 5 and 6 and knew George very, very, very well. So it's clearly not me who's just, odd man out that thinks this. It's the actual people who were behind Star Wars originally too. Now, Kleiser also goes on to say this about the sequels. I love Kathleen and what she's doing. She's keeping it alive. He says it's hard to keep it fresh and new, which I disagree with. You don't need to keep it fresh and new. You just need to continue the story. And if George's ideas weren't pushed out, Kathleen and Disney, then it would continue to be fresh and new always because it's continuing what started. It's never going to be a repeat like kind of what we got, just in a different way. He then goes on to say that everyone compares it to the originals and is it better? Is it worse? I don't really know. He says he hasn't watched many. He says he watched 1 or 2 of them and says that they just feel like a regular blockbuster movie with CGI shooting you in the face, essentially. And I quote, all of these big summer movies feel like a fire hose of visual effects shooting in your face. I mean, it's quite true. So I want you guys to go and check it out. Go read this book because it's actually very, very interesting. And it's also written by J.W. Rinzler, who recently just passed away. Big big condolences to his family. Rest in peace. And I was also able to point his GoFundMe to his family to pay for a lot of his bills in that live stream we did a little while ago, and I donated myself. So if you want to go do that, I'm also going to drop the link down below in the description. If it's still up, I haven't seen it in a while, but if it's still there, then I'll drop it. Now, for my take on what I think about Marcia's words on the sequel trilogy, I fully agree. Now, I don't care much if it's going to be focused around some girl, about Rey, like she says. That makes no difference to me. It could be a guy, it could be a girl. But I think the execution was poorly done, and as we learn, there are so many different hoops and loops that you have to jump through now to make movies that it's almost not even fun anymore. It just loses the original photo. It's like getting a photocopy of a photocopy of a... It's just not really the original thing anymore. It kind of looks like it, but it's just not what it was meant to be. And I think that is probably the main problem in Hollywood today. And I'm not saying this is the issue with all movies, but a lot of movies now, because they're so heavily centered around making money. Just the way it is. I truly feel that the sequel trilogy could have been a amazing trilogy for all fans. And again, if you like it, I'm so tired of having to constantly say this because people will jump down my throat and being like, you're being toxic. No, I'm having an opinion. I'm having an opinion, and if that bothers you, then just don't watch my videos. It's very simple. I'm allowed to have my own opinion. I don't have to feel pushed into loving this or hating this. I would love to like the sequels. I would love to like the sequels, but it's just not there for me. And, it's not there for Howard Kazanjian. It's not there for Marcia Lucas. It's not there for a lot of fans. And if it's there for you, I am very happy for you. And I am extremely ecstatic that you can share Star Wars and get into Star Wars through the sequels or through whatever it may be. For me, again, it's not there for me. I think the sequel trilogy could have been absolutely amazing, in my opinion, if they had stuck with George's story. And it really pains me to see that they pushed him out, especially Kathleen Kennedy, and him even calling her out publicly many times. I mean, it's a pretty ballsy move, but I mean, it's George Lucas, so it just goes with the trade. I think the way forwards with Star Wars is what they're doing right now. I think they're doing a fantastic job where they're having qualified people come up with a linear storyline, a storyline that they actually work on and know from beginning, middle, and end. And people who really know Star Wars and understand Star Wars. And something that I really resonate with what Marcia said was that these people didn't know Star Wars. And she calls out Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams as, you can quote me on this. I mean, damn, and this is coming from, you can't say like this is like coming from a man and it's like, someone just a toxic male thing. It's like, no, this is coming from a woman. And she says even that now Star Wars is being catered towards women, which is fine. I think Star Wars should be catered towards everybody, not just women, everybody. I think the Force is for everyone, not just for females or males. I think what she's really saying speaks to a lot of people and something that a lot of men can't say because they'd get canceled for. So the fact that now we have the queen of editing, of the originals, saying this kind of stuff, it's going to speak volumes. This is going to go viral. Not this video, but what she said is going to go viral. And I couldn't be more happy because finally, maybe people will start to see that it's not a toxic man thing, saying that we don't like the sequels because Rey is the main character. That is not the case at all. There have been tons of really cool female characters in movies that men go crazy over. Not just because they're hot or whatever, but because they're cool, badass characters. And I feel now that she said this, it's going to be a good thing. So here's an excerpt on how everything has changed in filmmaking. And it honestly makes me pretty sad because you can really see the difference in how movies were made back then. Like I was born in 1990, and I noticed that, like in the 90s, movies were just different. They were better. They had a better story. They weren't so heavily reliant on CGI to kind of run the story and run the movie and sort of be the star of the whole thing. Rather, it was the dialogue, it was the story, it was the acting that was carrying everything. Now, mind you, that's not every movie today. There are some really fantastic movies. Anyways, Kleiser says, everything's so different now. It's streaming systems rather than studio systems. Everything has completely changed. Back then, it was nice to have a structure and somebody was at the top who could say yes to a project based on their instincts rather than marketing research. It was structured, but it was looser in a way. If you got a yes, you could go ahead and make a movie. You got a green light as opposed to maybe. That has to go through all these hoops with various executives and marketing people, stockholders, and all that. Which is so true. I mean, I feel like Kylo Ren. You're so right. It's like Everything nowadays has to go through this like trickle system. You know, you got one guy at the top. Like it's like that scene in Tron Legacy, which is one of my all-time favorites as well. When Flynn is at the top of NCOM building and he's telling the security guard that it's okay, your boss is okay with this. Security guard's like, what the hell he is? And Flynn's like, do you know who your boss works for? Your boss works for the CEO. The CEO works for the shareholders. You know who the biggest shareholder is? And the security guard's like, I don't know, some kid. He's like, and that's kind of like what it is like now. You just have to go through all of these different executives and boards and people who don't even really know anything about the story. They just kind of maybe read something. And it actually goes into detail about this, is that it goes through like 34 pages of notes. Development today at the studios, because they often lack a creative chief, is usually accomplished by committee. After Kazanjian signed a studio contract for one project, the script received 34 pages of notes. So all the notes were conflicting as well. There was one note that was saying the movie was too dark, and then there was another note that's saying that they liked the humor in it. Like, what? And apparently these executives, they just dump these notes into one file, and then they just hand it, like marketers, stock people, like, just piss off. Like, you guys don't know anything about a movie or a story. You shouldn't have any business in telling the story. You don't know what will work well. If you did, then freaking go write it yourself. And in fact, that's actually what they go on to want to do. They do so many notes that they actually want to get a credit as producer. And then, you know, a whole bunch of laws and stuff changed, of course, in movie making, which you learn about in this autobiography, in this book. And it says more often than not, the project dies because then they want a writing credit. So this was an amazing read of a book. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I highly recommend you checking out this book for yourself. There's a lot of really, really cool information in there. Not even just on how movies have changed and, you know, the process of making movies and all that, but Howard's life himself. He's a really remarkable guy. And the fact that he came from a family that had nothing to do with movies and got himself accidentally into this major career and became one of the best in the industry, if not the best producer in the industry, it speaks volumes as to how talented this guy really is, and everything happens for a reason in life. So thanks for watching this video. Thanks for hearing my thoughts on it, my reaction, my take on it. Go check out the book yourself. I'm going to link it down below. Not sponsored in any way at all by this book, but I endorse it. I think it's great. So go check it out, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, remember, the Force will be with you always.